Okay. My camera is back to a two-hour memory. It does that. You know, it's so old. The memory is the whole thing is sometimes it'll screw up and it'll only give me an hour and a half or something. It was at an hour and 10 minutes. Now it's back to 2 hours. You know, but the thing is that's just the internals. You know, screwing up. Right, so we're going to talk about some radios and stuff again today. We were talking a little bit about shortwave the other day. We talked about the dangers of getting too close to a microwave and having the cell phone in your pocket all the time. Some women keep them in their shirts and their bras, you know, talking on the phone like this all the time. That's not good, okay? It's not a wives' tale. I mean, I showed it in the video, especially the very front of your phone. You know, it emits, you know, it emits, radio waves, basically. So you got microwaves, cell phone towers or microwave transceivers, and you know, then you got your transmitter receivers by your hand, and then you know, and then the microwave, you know, the magnetron in there, you know, when you turn it on, you know, it's emitting, and you know, the microwave is shielded mostly. If I remember right, it shields, but you're not supposed to get within 3 feet of it or something like that. And that was just proven, you know, a few days ago when I, you know, had the shortwave radio on and the microwave was transmitting. You know, I knew a guy that got knocked out because he was got too close to something with microwave one time. Anyway, it knocked him out. He woke up 2 weeks later. But you know, that's a story. I can't really remember the details, so I'm not even going to talk about it more than that. But I do want to talk about radios a bit, because we got stuff going on in the world now. You know, I think this one's unplugged over here. Here's a radio. Well, no, it's not unplugged. So take that out. Now this is kind of a little bit dusty because it's been sitting on the shelf for a while. But anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about several different types of radios here. This is just going to be kind of an overview, alright? Because my knowledge is antiquated and there's a lot of things I just don't remember anymore. I remember one time this guy with a walker going along, and he looked at me and he says, "Golden years, my ass." Anyway, I'm not as old as he was, but you know, it's still something to think about. You know, how everything is not always perfect. See, these little rubber covers don't work well, and they've been kind of set in a position for a while. Anyway, this particular handle, I sewed it on either side there to make it more permanent. This is the Kato 500 Voyager, KA 500 I think it's called. It's got no weather. It's got this dial here, you know, which is easy to micro tune into something if you need to do so. So these were not really expensive radios, but it's good radio. Um, Overall, it's a good radio. I think for the money, you know, you're getting, the weather bands, shortwave, FM, AM. It's got shortwave 1, shortwave 2, all the doodads, right? So I mean, overall, it's an affordable multi-band radio. I think that this is a good option to keep around for emergency use or whatever. Now, radios and stuff are never cheap, ever. Even when you get cheap radios, they're never cheap. Like, this radio doesn't have a battery on it right now, but you can get the long batteries, you can get the short batteries. This is one of the Baofangs. This one's programmed. What is it? UV5R5. So this is an unlocked Baofang. It's been programmed. It's got a lot of channels. It's programmed with mirrors and all that. Alright. So this is a pretty affordable option if you want a transmitter receiver. Remember though, all that FCC crap, any of those who care about that, right? Just remember, anything to do with ham radio or transmitter receivers is always subject to FCC stuff in a regular world situation. Grid down situation, things are going crazy, it's all bets are off. All bets are off. You don't have to worry about none of that stuff. You just do what you need to do, in my opinion. I mean, there are hams out there that probably hate my guts, and I know that there have been some that have expressed their dissatisfaction with my opinion on certain things. But you know what? So what? Do you own the airwaves? Does the government own the airwaves? No. Look, let me tell you what the word government means. It means control of the mind. Government, control of the mind. Now, this is a nice setup here, right? So turn this on. This is about a 15-watt transmitter receiver. Yeah. So I mean, it works fine. It's good for military type operations. We've got the extendable whip antenna on here, and so on, right? Now, this is not for your everyday person, right? Just kicking around, hobbyist, whatever. But we are living in a world that is not normal, alright? So you have to be ready for a lot of things. Now, I talked about the Kato Voyager, which is just a basic analog radio, right? And then I had the C Crane Skywave. It's a single sideband 2 model. It's got a few little doodads with it, like a real antenna. I'm talking about a real antenna, not real. All antennas are real. Let's say you got a real antenna. So you clip in the antenna and you pull it out, and then you just, clip it onto the whip antenna of the radio. You get better reception, right? I've been doing that for years with just a length of wire. I talked about that in another video here not long ago. This is the Grundig G5. Okay, this is This is basically an all band. It's got single side band and all that also. Um, it has less function to it though than the C Crane. The C Crane is actually quite small, right? So it is. I keep all this together. It's got the little instruction book and all that jazz there. Okay. There's the real antenna and some other extra stuff. Right. Now, as you can see, these both got little soft cases. Basically, you know, the soft cases are very similar. The C Crane radio is quite small, as you can see, and compared to the old Grundig. Now, this Grundig is pretty old, right? So I got this years ago. Used to carry it with me everywhere in a pack, and I used it to listen to a lot of radio transmissions from various parts around the world. So, I mean, if you look at the size difference, you know, I considered this one a packable radio to keep informed with stuff, right? This one's really compact, but it has a lot of features. I picked up the other night on this one, I picked up Slovakia, right? I'm in New England, so I picked up Slovakia. Clearly, they were playing some classical music or something. And I picked up someplace down south. They spoke about Nicaragua. So, you know, I mean, the reception is good, especially if you put the real antenna up, you know. The real antenna. I'm talking about a reel, right? Right. So here is the quote-unquote real antenna, right? Oh, we got this in here. Okay. Now you got to be careful pulling this out because there's probably a resistor or something there. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Anyway, they put a resistor in line, I think, with this antenna. Now this part here secures to a tree or whatever other object, right? And then you just pull this out of the reel gently till you get it the length you want, and then you just clip this end onto your whip antenna at the base, right? Now, then when you're ready to reel it in, I just take my little finger and my ring finger on the right hand. You could do the left hand, you can do whatever you want. It has an arrow on here to show you which way to turn it, right? It's dummy proof. You don't have to worry about turning it the wrong way, because what will happen is that wouldn't be good if you turn it the wrong way. So they put an arrow on there. C Crane put an arrow on there so that you know which way to turn the little gizmo. Okay, and then I get near this section here, and I just like to gently push it in through the little hole, because there is a it's like a clamshell thing here where it's got a support going across to screw together, I guess. Anyway, so I just push it through there, and I get all this lined up, pop that in there how it's supposed to go, and then just make sure it's all in and stow it away. Stow things away, don't just throw them here or there. You know, stow stuff away where it's supposed to be. Alright? Now, you know, this C Crane radio here is a pretty nice little package. it is expensive, but you're getting a lot you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. You know, it's got AM, FM, weather, it's got air, so you can pick up planes, shortwave, it's got single sideband. You know, I mean, it's got all the pertinent stuff that you want in a worldwide receiver, right? It's got all the pertinent stuff you want. So I recommend this one. It's the Sea Crane CC Skywave SSB2, right? So that's the one. Good. It's good compact radio. I mean, compact is something that you want for on the move or emergency situations. You know, yeah. It's having a little issue with this radio because it's been stowed for a very long time, for a number of years. And you know, I put the batteries in, I couldn't get it to come on. I think it was just dirty. I think the contact was dirty on the inside. Anyway, it comes right on now. You know, see. So, anyway, this is a Grundig G5. I'm sure there's better than that. Now, Eaton took over Grundig. So now it's Eaton Grundig, right? Now, I made up a little thing here, alright? And basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on my chair here and just talk about this a little bit. You know, I'm not a ham radio operator. I'm not a licensed ham radio operator. So just up front, letting you know, I have knowledge of radio. I worked on radio. I worked on military radios, stuff like that. But the thing is, I never went and got a ham license because I don't like giving them all my personal information and having everything on plastered out there for everybody to see. Oh, well, if you don't have anything to hide, you wouldn't be worried about that. Well, the thing is, I like my privacy. That's just the way I am. And I don't give a crap if ARRL likes it or not. You know, the thing is that people are entitled to privacy. And that's the reason why I never went and studied and got a ham radio license. I mean, I don't think that you should have to pay in order to be able to utilize something anyway. It should be like CB, you know. Just go buy a CB radio and go for it. That's an 11 meter radio, by the way. Some people, you know, work on those and they become 10 meter radios, which is ham, which is technically against FCC, blah, 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 you know, but whatever. So anyway, what do I have on here? Some basic stuff. Transmitter receivers. Receivers only. So, the transmitter receivers, we talked about ham radios, right? So these Baofangs are very, very popular for people in preparedness and the survivalist mindset. You know, they want to be ready with some communications on hand just in case. A lot of times you'll find handhelds 2 meter, 70 centimeter bands. You got other bands out there. I mean, there are a lot of bands. I can remember having a poster that had this spectrum of bands on it. I mean, it was amazing. It was mind-boggling how many, you know, bands you could transmit, receive on. But anyway, when we talk about bands, though, 2 meter 70 centimeter is pretty popular in the world, but this 6 meters band, high frequency, this band is very, very popular in third world countries because it follows the contours of the earth. It's not just a line of sight. So they call this the magic band. They call it the magic band because you could get such very long distances on 6 meters, right? And so you're going to find that with a lot of military organizations. That's how I'm going to put it. A lot of different military organizations operate on 6 meters. And yeah, this is just for your information purposes only, right? Now, but yeah, the majority of stuff that a lot of people look at is they look at handheld radios, you know, but mostly 6 meter high frequency radio. You're gonna find that in a desktop model. You know, I'm not involved with all that. I have not paid hardly any attention to radio in years, but I mean, there could be 6 meter out there somewhere, you know, that is, you know, more handy to carry around, should I say. Now, the thing is, a lot of people say that they're 2 meter handhelds or stuff. They'll say, well, but you could use repeaters. Yeah, but the thing is that somebody has to be operating a repeater. They have to be operating a repeater, number one. And number two, you know, you have to know what numbers to plug in to your handheld. Right? So, you know, repeaters is something to think about, but you got to remember that those repeaters have to be online. Somebody has to have them online, wherever they are. So, I've seen people talk a very long ways on a repeater network. But the thing is that, you know, for your average everyday person, a repeater type situation is just not something to think about. And then you have the FUDs, you know, the old school hams that think, well, you have to have a license and you know, this and that, and you have to comply with these rules and regulations and blah blah blah, you know. But the thing is nobody owns the airwaves. I mean, come on, give me a break. You know, it's nice to have guidelines in place. It's nice to be respectful with everyone else and whatnot. But the thing is that, you know, when it hits the fan, all bets are off. You know, I'm not worried about any license. I'm sure a lot of other people are not either. Now, what are other things that we need to consider? You know, GMRS, I think that there's some, I believe that there's some restrictions in this world about GMRS. You know, like power and this, that, you know. Now, MURS, M-U-R-S, MURS or MURS, okay, those frequencies are open to everyone. And you can run those on your ham radio. You can run GMRS on your ham radio. I think that they have maybe it's a 2-watt, maybe a 2-watt restriction or something like that on GMRS, which is kind of stupid. You know, I think personally, I think whatever wattage you need to get out there for some kind of an emergency or whatever, run it. You know, like this radio over here is it's 12 to 15 watts. All right, I think 15 watts peak. and I think 12 watts continuous. So, and then, you know, if you have the whip antenna, you know, you're just definitely not going to receive as well. A whip antenna, a rubber duck or whatever. You know, you want something that you can extend out like this blade, okay? And then you can really receive a lot better, okay? So your transmission, you know, you got pretty good power on your transmission. Alright, so you could transmit out there, but if you can't hear them, what's the point? Right? So you got to have a good blade antenna. Don't use a rubber duck. Right? This would be kind of like a rubber duck antenna. Right? I've got better. I've got a few better antennas for this. I think I even have a blade antenna for this. I've got a box of goodies for my communications stuff. Now, no weather. No weather is something good to have. Now, if you don't have pre-programmed channels, you know, in your radio, then you need to find a frequency from your area. Have a book with frequencies that can be useful to you, right? So no weather, you know, it's always good to know what the weather is, right? Now, that's the transmitter receiver side of things. And over here I've got receiver, I've got shortwave radios, C. Crane, Eaton Grundig, Kato. Now, one thing is too is you got to remember antennas, right? You can have the very best radio in the world. You can have a lot of money invested in a radio, but your radio ain't squat if it cannot transmit or receive. You know, it's not. It's as worthless as a rock if you can't hear anything and you can't send anything. I just can't understate that enough. I mean, overstate that enough. Sorry, guys, it's the way I am anymore. I can't overstate that enough. You know, you gotta have an antenna that's worth a darn. If you don't have good antenna, might as well have nothing. You have the best radio, get a cheap antenna, or just a basic antenna. Bad day. Now all the ham guys out there really get elaborate. You know, they have very elaborate antenna systems that they've developed over time because ham itself has always been considered a hobbyist thing, right? I mean, I can remember when I was young, you know, there were ham clubs. I remember my brother was in the ham club. He never really did much with it because my parents wouldn't buy him stuff. Because even back then, you know, I mean, buying this, buying that for ham stuff, you know, he didn't have all the tools in his toolbox either. You know, so he was not real good with electronics and stuff like that. I mean, he was very good with mechanical stuff like cars, right? He was very good with that. But yeah, the switches just didn't turn on for him for electronics. You know, some people could do well at both. They got mechanical, electrical people. I'm one of those. I'm good with both mechanical and electrical things. Yeah. But the thing is that and I pick up things quick too. Like, you know, I don't have a ham radio license. You know, ham radio license doesn't mean that you know anything though either. It's true. Because somebody could just go and memorize questions and answers and get their license and still be fiddle farting around, not knowing what they're doing. I'm not saying I know what I'm doing. I only partially know what I'm doing anymore. I'm just kind of like there. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, we were talking about these receivers. I've only got about 9 minutes left here. So I'm going to talk about something that I feel is very important to people like us. And who are people like us? People like us that live in this world. We need to be able to communicate and receive communication from each other, right? Without control. That's the thing. Without control. Now, I'm going to bring back the old radio, right? I'm going to bring back the radios here, and we're going to talk about them just a little bit more. I'm going to use this C Crane because the Grundig is not on the market anymore, I don't think. I think that's an old model that nobody can just buy off the shelf anymore. And C Crane makes a good product. They were endorsed by Art Bell all the time. And you know what? Art Bell, he's gone. God rest his soul. Art Bell is passed. But that man was a ham radio operator, and he was a very good ham radio operator. I'm sure that he had it the highest level. I'm sure he did. But he recommended C Crane. And if Art Bell recommended C Crane, that's good enough for me. Now, this particular package came with C Crane earbuds, right? Now, C Crane sells a couple of different earbuds. They sell one that has a microphone on it, but if I understand correctly, those don't work with the radio. They're good for like your phone and whatnot. So it comes with a set of earbuds, which obviously will work with the radio. I try not to use these because I want them fresh for if there is a situation that I need to listen without anybody else listening, So I want them there and ready. This is to make another antenna. It has a Wago style connecting point on one end, which I know that you don't know what that is probably. Wago brand. It's an electrical electronics brand. Wago, W-A-G-O. Anyway, on one side, it's got a place to put a ground. So if you drive a metal spike down into the ground and have a wire on that, you can run it here. Alright, so that's ground. And then you can run an antenna, right? An aerial antenna. You can run a wire, just put it up in the tree, right? And then put the other end here. And then you just plug this in. There's an antenna port in the side of the radio here. And you just plug it in, right? There you go. And then, of course, I mean, this is an option for you. And then, of course, you have this real antenna. Real. Not real, but real. You got this real antenna. You just hang this on a tree or whatever outside. Gently pull the antenna out of the reel antenna out of the reel, and then clip it to the base of your whip antenna on your your all bands radio, right? Now that is what this particular C Crane radio comes with. Now, remember, this is shortwave radio. This is shortwave radio, alright? This is not internet radio. Now, we're going to talk about that. I got only less than 5 minutes left, so I'm going to talk about this real quick. I think that it is very important. I believe that this is very important. And if C Crane people are watching this, or any other radio operator is watching this, you know, I want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to me closely. Because I don't find hardly any channels. It doesn't matter if it's this one or the Grundig. You know, now the thing is, I am in between two mountain ranges, so that will play into part of that. But people have moved away from shortwave radio. AM FM is still pretty popular, but shortwave has been going away slowly for a very long time. We have got to stop that. We have to stop that, because when everything goes down, shortwave is still up, ham is still up, etc. Right? When everything goes down, those are up. When the internet is switched off, what's left? Okay? This is what we have to understand, and we have to pound this into the heads of everybody listening on all of our personal channels that we may have out there in YouTube land. What's left? I know internet radio is very, very popular, and even C Crane makes internet radios. But the thing is the internet is controlled. It's controlled. It's a controlled space. It's not a frequency. Why do you think you got people from the FCC that are like a dog on a bone about finding people that are quote unquote operating illegally or whatever? You know, I mean, you can't control this. Okay, back in the 1970s, there was this program on television, and it was called, I think it was called Captain Midnight. Captain Midnight was a kid who drove around in his van with he made a pirate radio station in his van. You know, I mean, this is what we're getting at here. What are we getting at? We're getting at the ability to communicate and be in control of our communications. You're not going to get that with internet radio, guys. I hate to tell you, but the internet radio is even, you know, is good in a normal world. It is not good in an SHTF world, okay? Even, you know, ham radios. Guys have gotten into, you know, using the internet for ham radios and whatnot, and, you know, sending messages, you know, here and there. You know, they've gotten away from repeaters and whatnot. I mean, come on, guys. Wake up. You know, especially those in the ham community out there, you gotta understand, you cannot trust the government anymore. You just can't. It's the way it is. You know, it's speaking about a radio like this, you know, these types of radios used to be in emergency kits everywhere. Years ago, you know, you could not find somebody who was into survivalist type mentality into surviving and being prepared for a situation or whatever, you could not find one person that did not have a shortwave radio or an all bands radio or whatever you like to call them. You wouldn't find anybody that had that type of mindset that wouldn't have a radio like this. And there were big desk units. I remember Grundig made this satellite 700 or something like that. Now it's 800 or 750 or 800 or something like that. The big satellite, with the antenna that went around on the top. And I mean, scanners were huge. I mean, yeah. Why is that? Because people want to be informed. They want to be informed. They want to be able to hear what's going on out there, right? If we lose shortwave, government has the kill switch for your internet radio. If we lose shortwave, we're screwed. A lot of radio stations are talking out there about how radio is on its last leg, because you got stuff like satellite radio, internet radio, you got other options, but I'm trying to drive the nail home. Bam! I'm trying to drive it home with you that if we lose shortwave, then we are absolutely at the mercy of whoever controls the internet and the satellite radio stuff. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. If we lose shortwave, we're screwed. We gotta have shortwave channels. I looked up coast to coast the other day. I looked up coast to coast because I used to listen to coast AM on shortwave, because they had dedicated shortwave frequency that they would send out coast to coast on. And I remember, listening to shortwave coast to coast, a number of years ago. And I can't find it. I don't think it exists anymore. That's, what? That's wrong. There needs to be channels like coast to coast on shortwave, and other channels on shortwave that give us information. That is not just prepackaged crap. Commercials and whatnot. I mean, I know that there's a lot of commercials on channels, like coast to coast and whatnot. But the thing is that they will put out things, like Art Bell, right? Midnight in the Desert and all these other types of channels that people used to find interesting. These, not channels, but you know what I'm saying, other programs. But the thing is we gotta have shortwave. Shortwave is the last leg of independence of communication to the masses. Okay? Because it gets out there. It gets out there, and people have receivers to receive it. So this is one of the things I brought up pirate radio earlier with Captain Midnight in the 70s, the movie. I mean, the thing is that, at some point, everybody might have to start operating their own pirate radio in order to get information out there, because the internet will be locked down, right? Satellite radio will be locked down. Internet radio locked down. That stuff is at the mercy of people. I mean, but if you got radio, radio's always been about freedom. Whether there was that on the old movie Red Dawn, Radio Free America. You know, I mean, that's the thing. Freedom. You know, I mean, we got to be able to communicate to others out there. We got to get messages out. And when we don't have a venue to do that anymore, bad news. Yeah. Well, timer went off. I know that's been 40 minutes. So we've talked a little bit about this and a little bit about that as far as radio and communications go. I've forgotten a lot of stuff that I knew over the years. I knew quite a bit more, let me tell you. You know, I used to work on transmitter receivers, you know, the military stuff and other things. But you know, I never thought it would get to this point, but I did think it would get to this point. I did and I didn't. You know, I wish that we were at the point we are now 30 years ago. You know, I started seeing what was going on many years ago. Anyway, I got this timeline up here, 2024 to 2032. You know, Jesus, the second coming of Jesus is probably 2031, 2032, somewhere in there. But the rapture must happen first. First, the rapture has to happen. It's got to be, it's either going to be in I'm thinking 2027 or 2028. You know, we still got a little bit of time left. But, you know, people keep saying, oh, the rapture, or the great tribulation, or the tribulation period is 7 years. Okay, the tribulation period is 7 years, but the first 3.5 years is the beginnings of sorrows. The beginnings of sorrows is the first 3.5 years. The great tribulation is 3.5 years. So what's going to happen is right now, according to what I've got on my timeline here, we're in the beginnings of sorrows, according to everything that I have figured out with the Bible. Matthew 24, verse 14 is the rapture. 15 is where all the nonsense happens with the non-believers. Now, you know, you say, oh, on Matthew 24, verse 14 is the rapture? For Christians, yeah. And then, you know, later on in Matthew 24, Jesus refers back to earlier in Matthew 24. That's why you see stuff going here, and then there's a bad period of time with the Great Tribulation, and then it talks about after the Great Tribulation, and then it talks about, you know, 2 people in the field, one's taken, one's left. But see, the thing is you can't read that like a recipe. It's just not Betty Crocker. You don't read that Matthew 24 like a recipe. It has to be read like a conversation. Because that, and later in the conversation is when Jesus is referring back to when the Christians were still on the earth. He's saying, well, you know, this, that, blah, blah, blah. He says, but 2 will be in the field, 1 will be taken, and 1 will be left. Right? And then after those people are left, and the ones that were taken, that's when all the stuff hits the fan. Okay? I've got other videos on this, so go watch them. If you're interested in the rapture and the end times, go for it. So, I got on here Matthew 24 verse 14, and then Matthew 24 verses 40 and 41. That's the same event. That's right. So anyway, the harpazo, the rapture, should happen sometime between mid-2027, mid-2028, something like that. But 2 Thessalonians 2 says that the man of sin cannot be revealed until after the harpazo, which is the removal. That's right. The removal of the Holy Spirit-filled Christians has to be done first. So that falling away that latter Bibles talk about, in my Bible it says revolt. So we're waiting for a few things to happen. We're going to be out of here, and then the man of sin will reveal himself. But that will happen right after the rapture has happened. See you later.